Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Salatu salam ala Rasulillah. Welcome to another episode of the Middle West podcast. I'm your host, Thaqib Musa. And no, I'm joking, right? I'm clearly not Thaqib Musa. This is the Middle West podcast. But today we've got a female takeover in light of International Women's Week. So my name's Rafa Bouchada and I'm with my co-host, Yasmin Adam.
Salam, guys.
And we're joined by the lovely Zara Mohamed.
Assalamualaikum.
So we've got a bio here from Thaqib that says Zara Mohamed, ex-president of FOSIS, Scottish legend and current XYZ of MCB.
Wow, XYZ of MCB. Thank you, Thaqib. Really like that they take this show quite seriously and make sure they get all the correct information from their guests.
Yeah, that's why we've taken over.
Yeah, definitely. They might not come back if you like us that much.
Yeah.
So you're the Assistant Secretary General of the Muslim Council of Britain, is that right?
That's right, yeah.
And you're also part of the Muslim Council of Scotland as the media head?
Yeah, that's correct.
I think it'd be easier to list what organisations you're not part of.
What I'll do is we'll send a link. Oh wait, it's a podcast, I can't. But if you just Google me, you might find a couple of things in there.
Oh, good things, we hope.
Or you can ask Thaqib Musa.
So tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I'm just your average Joe person who's swept into the world of leadership. So alhamdulillah, obviously, as the description said, I was the first elected female president of the Federation of Student Islamic Societies. But prior to that, humble beginnings with my ISOC in Samsa, Kof Yasmin, who was the first female president there. And then, of
That's
course...
where we're at the moment, isn't it?
Yeah, we're actually in Strathclyde. It's given me goosebumps.
We've came to the brighter side of the UK. We've travelled up to Scotland finally.
It's actually true. Everywhere's snowing right now except for Glasgow, which has never happened before.
The sun
By
is
the way,
shining.
but like outside Glasgow, it's quite bad.
Yeah, well, it's pretty tropical here. I think a lot of people should relocate to Glasgow because sunny skies, warm breeze, a lot of amazing architecture.
Or just visit us. Everyone says they'll visit Scotland and they never come.
They never do.
never
They think
do.
that
They
we're
never
like
do.
this other world, like, oh my gosh, I need to travel to Scotland. Like, it's like 50 hours away.
I notice sometimes actually with events down south, they'll have transport from Birmingham, Manchester, London, and in Scotland there's just one.
Yeah.
Transport from Scotland. Although it takes me longer to get to the northern point of Scotland than it does London.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, very good.
We're big. We're
underappreciated.
So if we haven't convinced you, please do check out. So yeah, alhamdulillah, I was able to, after kind of my journey in FOSIS, I decided to step up and was elected in the Muslim Council of Britain, and then last January joined the Muslim Council of Scotland. And obviously my academic background is human rights law, so yeah, just, living life.
We noticed that you say first female president. Is that something notable?
Well, what are words? I think obviously nobody just wants to be this kind of token female leader. And I remember actually when I was elected, when they were writing the press release, they asked me, do you want us to write first female or just president elected? And I think I said the latter. I just want to be the president elected, not... But then, irrespective of that, it doesn't matter because everybody is looking at the fact that you're a female. So I think you just have to embrace it. And I think for a lot of sisters who've spoken to me, it's been inspiring for them. And also, I'm sure, challenging for a lot of perceptions on leadership. And for me, just challenging generally. It was a very difficult experience, very challenging. I think being the first of anything puts a lot of spotlight on you. So in some ways, you're also defining that role and kind of setting the path. So you have to really work hard to ensure people don't just think, well, females can't do it. And also, nobody wants to be the only female in leadership. So if you're considering it, guys, please do go for it.
But do you say then we put that burden on ourselves of working twice as hard not to be this female label? Like, what's wrong with it?
Well, isn't that the age-old question? Very philosophical, Yasmin. I think it's only the second question now already. I think irrespective of whether you want to or not, it's about society generally and their perceptions of female. I think B, females' perceptions of themselves, self-doubt, self-esteem, and also thinking, because men set the tone often, I was in rooms, and still am, where it's predominantly males, and males are predominantly in leadership, so whether you like it or not, that is the baseline. I think as a woman, you just have to define what leadership means to you, but also to be yourself. I think at one point I thought I had to be really serious and really powerful and wear a lot of black. But I just couldn't fight my jokey personality.
You're still wearing black?
Well, just for today, guys, we have to get up quite early for this podcast. The sacrifice was real. So, no, I think a lot of the times you think you need to be A, X, Y, and Z, but actually you can't fight who you are, and you just got to be yourself. And the most important part of me is that Scottish quality. As I'm reminded so many, where is it you're from? What is that accent? But it's okay because we can understand you.
Do you think that sometimes females are pushed into leadership roles just because they are female to make them look good? Because now it's the new thing for all these organisations.
Or to make the organisation look good.
I think we're in a time where there's so much more focus now on the lack of females, whether it's in an executive team, in positions of leadership. Every organisation now, Muslim or not Muslim, is criticised heavily, and rightly so, for their lack of female representation. I think in some ways people are, I guess it's this kind of like positive discrimination, is that what it is, or affirmative action? This idea, I mean, no one should be pushed into leadership, but I think we do need to invite women to the table, especially because we're not working from the same starting point as men. And a lot of people are like, oh, it's the best person for the job. I used to get this a lot, and I used to believe it too, best person for the job. But then who is deciding? Yeah. Who is deciding who's the best person for the job? I don't think a lot of women are. And so when you say that to yourself, actually you're limiting your chances, because sometimes to make a start, you have to put yourself forward.
But then what happens when women do get in the door? Like, is that not, because I feel like a lot of organisations have pushed women into leadership positions or into notable positions, but then the conversation now is, well, what happens after they're pushed into the organisation? Because I mean, we see a lot of females leaving their positions. We see a lot of we don't see females then taking up that position after. It does feel very tokenistic.
No, I think that's a really important point. I think the problem is leadership does not accommodate the different dynamics that females face and the social issues they face. For example, if you get married, we see many people who get married, they disappear. Or if you have a child, or the fact that it can be quite a male-heavy environment. If you're the only woman in the room, which I was, there's a lot of guys you have to deal with. When I was president at a committee of 17, alhamdulillah, I had like more females than ever in that team. But often it would be quite a guy-heavy environment. And I know other sisters where they were the only women and they'd have to ask for another sister to come to feel more comfortable. So you can imagine that's a lot of pressure for anyone to be in. And also you're thinking, well, this is tough. Like, is it worth it? And if you're not getting that support and if the environment isn't encouraging you to grow and helping you, then of course you're going to give it up. I think the problem is we focus a lot on the female journey, and as opposed to also the male dynamic in that journey. And we don't look at males in the same way. We don't think, oh, well, why didn't they continue in their leadership journey? I wonder what happened. I wonder if they were worried because they were going to get married and it would be too difficult after that.
I remember I was actually told that once. I was in a room again, a lot of guys were there, and they were talking about, I was telling them, I noted that there wasn't many females here. And they told me, oh, don't worry, this will happen to you too. You're going to get married, you're going to have kids, and you're not going to continue this journey. Just blatantly to my face. That's it, right? Isn't it? Your journey's going to end soon. And I remember shocked. I was like, this isn't the kind of support you look for. Or that's the idea, the mentality that the guys have and also the girls have, and that's why you don't get women continuing. And it's such a vicious cycle.
It's true. So that's what I mean. I mean, if that's what you're facing, then it's kind of like we've already conditioned that environment where women are not going to continue, but we put so much focus on it as well. And being on the community scene now with the elders, I'm also like, desperately looking, and there is definitely a want now for more women to step up, but it's an older age bracket, and a lot of these women, maybe they've got kids or focusing on career and family life or whatever. And again, it's like, is the space really accommodating for women? And especially like if I'm doing media interviews, I had a comment once from one of the TV channels saying it's so refreshing to see a female face and also a young face. And I think that we in some ways have a responsibility to keep pushing through. But I don't criticize anyone who, for their own personal reasons, has stopped, because you can't judge it. Everyone's got their own circumstances, and it's difficult.
But then aren't we almost, like, this is a bit of a devil's advocate here, but like, aren't we almost doomed to fail? So we're saying that the organisations aren't ready for us, and we're putting young women into these roles. They burn out, they get put off, and it's the same cycle, as you said, Rafa. It's a vicious cycle, and then we just end up losing these women completely. So why
if we don't try, nothing's going to change, Yasmin. You yourself are a trailblazer and a pioneer. You've been the first female president of your own. I mean, no, I think we can't look at things like that. I mean, of course, we have to be optimistic. And if no one does it, then, well, come on. That's not the attitude that we have in this podcast. All we're saying is we must change the way this experience is. And that's why I unfortunately keep sacrificing myself. I hope you're listening, guys, if anybody wants to join. No, I mean, the reason I'm joining the community space, because I think that women have an important role to play there. And yeah, it's something I'm passionate about. And I think whether it is the community space or the workspace or whatever it is, we can make a difference, as so long as we have a willingness to try. And ultimately it's Allah that changes things, so we just have to put the effort in. But yeah, I think things will always be difficult, but then if it was difficult, well, it's not so satisfying when you change it afterwards. So
you mentioned that, when you were talking about the best man for the job, and sometimes things are natural where guys do have more opportunities than girls in our day and age. And I've noticed it as well, working with lots of guys. They've had things that they've done in the past, or mentors or classes that cater for boys or men that the girls don't have. So naturally you're going to be at a disadvantage when you start, which can be off-putting for a lot of girls. And they feel, and even for the guys, it almost like validates their opinion that, the girls know less, or they're not competent for this job, but because they started at a disadvantage. So how do we tackle that? Should we go into things that we're not quite ready for, and then that breaks the cycle, or should we start from scratch and get opportunities and then put them in?
I think, is there not an element of, as women, we're very we underestimate ourselves and we're quite humble? Like, even just outside Islamic organisations and community work and stuff, even just looking at job applications, you find a lot of guys will apply for jobs that, to be honest, they're not probably
qualified for.
Yeah,
I've seen that.
Yasmin said it, not us.
No, I've seen it. I back you up.
And then, but with women, we're automatically like, I don't qualify for that, so I'm not going to apply.
It's like Imposter Syndrome, isn't it?
Yeah, so if we had that same confidence, man, we would be.
No, I think, I think it's one of those things where things have to work in parallel. So you have to kind of, on an ongoing basis, try and fix the problem, but at the same time you can't stop women going in, because I think we massively underestimate our value, experience, and what we can contribute. And at the same time, you're right, we need the growth and development. So I've started a series of kind of upskilling workshops for women, because I just thought as well, I mean, it's good if you have that exposure, but a lot of women and girls don't. And at the same time, it's actually all boils down to confidence. There just seems to be a lot of confidence on the other side. I guess massively overestimate their abilities sometimes. So I think, I think where we can, and sometimes it's not like you need to attend a workshop or a training. I think it's about putting yourself in different environments where you're able to learn and grow and continuing to challenge yourself, because as three of us have experienced, we've been put out of our comfort zones and we've had to thrive in that environment, and we couldn't hold back, whether it's speaking up in a meeting or doing some public speaking at an event, or simply encouraging one another. I mean, that kind of support makes such a difference, and often we've seen when girls do step up and they organise an event or a conference, you just think, and you can see it in themselves, that they just feel like this is something they've been able to achieve. So I think, we need to do all of us have a role to play where we can help and support women, but also we have to remember that the male mindset is also quite important in that. I mean, I'm being very grateful for the support from my family, my dad and my brothers and people around me. Even when I was president, mashallah, there was so much support from the guys too. Mm-hmm. So I think that it can't just be women, you know, there's a male side to this conversation. And it's not to say that all guys are bad. I think there's been loads of brothers that have helped us and supported us. But I think it's just the environment, unfortunately, hasn't been always the most productive.
So we need supportive brothers, and we need girls that are going outside their comfort zone to try new things. Quite interesting you say that, because I remember recently here in Glasgow we had a family camp, and the ladies there, we did an icebreaker for them, just like we normally do at like events, at youth events. And a lot of them got really excited. It's the first ever icebreaker they'd ever done. And you can see even something simple like an icebreaker, how much it boosted their confidence. And then they started doing their own games, whilst before they were just sitting silently, no one was doing anything. So it's like baby steps that we need to open the doors for. And sometimes within some communities, the guys do have the keys to those doors, and the females just have to kind of go for it. But we've spoken in very generalised terms sometimes, right? We're like, all guys are like this, or all girls are like this. Is that a dangerous path to trod on?
Yeah. Yes.
Correct.
In short, please don't generalise. I mean, everything is case by case, and your experiences will be very different. And I think when you start thinking all guys or all girls, in some ways you can create a story that doesn't actually exist, and you might be thinking there are barriers there, but there are not. And I think really you need to speak to people individually, but also remember that ultimately, like, nobody's against you. You know, like, people aren't naturally against you, unless you're making arguments with them, then maybe. But more times than not, people are supportive. It's actually just a lot of voices in your own head and preconceived judgments. But I think the best thing that I learned is having a lot of emotional intelligence is a very good skill. Being able to understand people, and understand how people communicate. As they say, you know, you shouldn't just, talk to understand to talk. It's not about what you say, but it's about what the other person understands.
Is it don't speak with the intention to reply or something like that?
Don't speak.
I've never heard of these.
Oh, for goodness sake, Yasmin. These are major productivity tips. Anyway, the point is, don't just talk at people, talk to people, and think about what they understand from your message.
Have you ever had a story or a scenario where it was blatant sexism? You can't,
God,
you know?
Whoa.
Where do you want her to start?
Guys, I don't know if I can reveal those kind of...
Keep it anonymous. But, you know,
name
because a
and
lot of people do experience it, and then they try brush it off, like maybe I did misunderstand, or maybe, you know, giving the benefit of the doubt. But sometimes we can't be naive on these issues either.
I think I started off very naive and very kind of like, oh, everybody's nice and everybody's supportive. I mean, of course, if you're a woman in leadership, you're going to face misogyny. I mean, of course. So I can't say that I haven't experienced it. I think I faced it in different forms. Maybe I'll be nicer about it and say sometimes people did it consciously and sometimes it was unconsciously, because sometimes you just get very dominant figures that it's just in their way of being, you know, and other times it's maybe people who actually can't really grasp the fact that women could be in leadership. So definitely I think I get, and also now in this space, the youth thing a lot as well. A lot of people are kind of like, because you're young, you apparently don't know anything. So, no, I definitely faced misogyny, unfortunately, but it comes with the perks of the job, you know. It's just
one thing that we covered when we spoke to Ragad was, and she mentioned it was this internalized misogyny from women as well. So she was saying, you know, some of the comments that she got were not only from men but from women as well. So how has that played into your journey?
No, I definitely faced that. I think sometimes you think women are going to be really supportive, and so you've got allies already, and sometimes they're just not. And I think actually sometimes it's also to do with leadership style, and people respond to different leadership styles. Some people like more directive leadership, others more consultative and, you know, more collaborative. So my leadership style was very collaborative, very consultative, and so sometimes that approach doesn't work. And also maybe I'm a bit too energetic. I realise not everybody likes positive energy. But no, I think it depends, and I think you're right. I think sometimes females respond differently, and that can be really challenging, but like anything in life, you have to work through it. You know, you just have to get on with it. So it teaches you a lot. But if you let it hold you down, then you're not going to get very far. And people's opinions of you are always going to change, like the weather in Scotland. People's opinions are always going to change, so you can't just base everything on their reactions. You have to have your own moral compass, and you need to do the right thing, and that's kind of always been my guiding principles.
So if we take it from a guy's perspective, right, do you think that they feel like they have to walk on eggshells when they're dealing with females in their team? Or when they're
I'm going to be really interested. Do you know, like, the statistics of, like, people that listen to this podcast? As in, like, demographic-wise? So, like,
No.
I'd be, if we could,
I think,
I'd be quite
after
interested to see
this podcast, I think there's going to be a surge.
We should just take over.
What were you saying from the male point of view?
Yes, so do you feel like they are walking on eggshells when it comes to dealing with females? Because sometimes we can be quite quick to say, oh, he's misogynistic, or it's because I'm female.
I think if we start crying, that definitely changes the game. I've seen guys really struggle when someone cries. Like, just do whatever you want. So, I mean, obviously, from a guy's point of view, no, I think we get a wide spectrum of guys, and I think some guys are naturally very good, very understanding. They can play that supportive. I think it's about that high emotional intelligence. So I think some guys are very perceptive and understand teamwork involves different personalities, and with the gender dynamics, they can be quite supportive of that. But I think there are others who just, like females too, just don't care. And I don't know, I guess it depends. That's very specific to the context. There might be a situation where they feel they need to walk on eggshells, but I don't think they would do that from the outset unless they're scared of women.
But that's a genuine question, though. Are men scared to be led by women?
Should we ask my husband later?
We know what the answer is going to be. There's only one right answer.
He is the leader, of course. Okay. Well, I think these things we have to, as good Muslims, we of course work together in a very collaborative way. And leadership shouldn't be about dominating one another, because that doesn't get you anywhere.
Yeah. But taking it from, like, an Islamic perspective, how have you found that? I'm not sure how to word this question, but, like, so thinking of these dynamics, but in, like, for example, a normal work setting, right? And then when you come to Islamic organisations, how does the kind of Islamic ethos or the Islamic parameters work into it? It's like, how have you found that it helps? I don't know if that made any sense.
My interpretation of that question is, I think that obviously Islam is one of the most beautiful things, because it's not just about the Islamic environment, but also about the Islamic principles that work really, really well in terms of So, I mean, ultimately, all of our work is for the sake of Allah, and to do that work, we have morals and ethics which we follow. And I think the thing is, Islam really uplifts the woman. And not to be, like, very cliche and generic about this, but I think that if everybody follows what they're supposed to follow, then you find that there's a massive amount of respect, modesty and courtesy in that team space. And also the idea that we're here to make each other shine. And in doing that, and in being successful in our work, ultimately we're fulfilling that Islamic goal. So I think, for example, when we were doing the Believe and Do Good campaign with FOSIS and MAB, it's a wonderful campaign. It doesn't matter if you're a male or a female, young or old, but you're giving something out there to the world, and in that good deeds, and you can just feel like such an immense level of teamwork, and also that you feel like you're really personifying what Islam really is about in that faith and action. And whether it's giving blood and everybody just looking a little bit pale. I remember they had to push me off the chair because they're like, you're looking like a bit too pale, or going out and feeding the homeless. Like, there's so many wonderful acts of good. And I think when you're doing projects like that, all the kind of barriers and the walls come down, and you're actually there, as they say, the believers are like building blocks to one another. Mm-hmm. You really, really feel it there. So I think that one of the best things about being in all the organisations that I've been part of is the incredible brothers and sisters that I've met, who have made my journey so much better, and who I've tried to make as well. So every time I go to conference, now feeling like an oldie, you know, I've met so many people through that journey, and whether it was visiting them or working together on projects and doing different campaigns, and you just have so many memories together. And like people always say they miss their uni days or they miss their ISOC days, and the reason they miss it is because of the people, right? And the way they work together. And even the three of us, many a train journey, many a midnight rant, many a lack of sleep post bus ride home.
Should have recorded them.
No, I think they probably wouldn't be.
Start our own podcast.
A bit confidential. But you know, it's that amazing brotherhood and sisterhood. Like that is the peak of it. So I think in all of these conversations, you know, if everybody works together in the most effective manner, that's when we achieve like the most.
So I think we fell prey to it as well. So in order for us to rise up, we have to rise up together and not push one gender or one group down, because we did kind of refer to guys having these grandiose images of themselves, which is not great. Don't do it. So we have to build each other up. But moving away from this whole male-female conversation, yourself as a leader, did you ever have these feelings of, you know, imposter syndrome, or that you couldn't do it?
Yeah, definitely. Oh, and I won't lie about that. And you'll see that in some of my other publications. No, I think one of the biggest things I struggled with was feeling I was good enough, and also feeling that I was the person for the job, and you know, like I was the right person for this. But obviously, you have to hold on to the fact that Allah doesn't give you a burden you can't bear. And also, like, if Allah opens the door to good for you, you should take it. So I think you're always constantly battling that. And I think part of it is just all these kind of voices in your head, like, you know, the waswas, but also the people around you. And sometimes you can get very harsh feedback when you're a leader. You can get very critical feedback, or you think you're doing something good, and then obviously it just goes horribly wrong. So I think a lot of the times it's actually how you deal with failure and mistakes that is really important, not successes. Because success, as they say, is like it's so temperamental. Like it comes and it goes, and it feels good, and you know, the iman boosting and all that stuff. But how do you deal with the tougher times? How do you deal with the difficult conversations? How do you deal with people not liking you, you know? And as this very social creature that I am, you know, that's really difficult. And as a leader, you know, that is difficult when people, you know, tell you that they don't think that, you know, you're doing well, or they didn't like what you did, or whatever it is. So I think mistakes and failures, and also they bring you, as they always say, you know, when you're suffering through a trial, that's when you run to Allah a lot more. And I think it's the same in leadership. Like when you feel like depleted or low, then you realise actually my faith isn't been in the best place either. So I think leadership is a challenge, and you really need to make sure that you have a very strong foundation of self-belief. And even if you don't, it's that spiritual foundation that's going to get you through. And of course, amazing company like you guys over here. I'm sure you've experienced a lot. Yasmin, what's going on? What shall I do?
Have you ever found that, whether it was at the start or even now, that you fell into this kind of, I don't want to say habit, but let's say habit for now, of trying to not fit yourself into a box? So being constantly aware that you're going to be ticked into this box or that box, or you know, like breaking the glass ceiling, or breaking this stereotype, or you know, being fit into any of those cliches.
I mean, sometimes it's impossible to avoid, if I'm honest.
Yeah.
I've definitely tried to fight it, but it's becoming increasingly difficult. You're more noticeable, you know, as a woman, you're more noticeable. And as I said, I'm a young person too, so I think it's hard, but I think if you can make the most of it, it's probably a better way to deal with it, and that's what I do, which is, well, if I'm going to be the first, I'll do my best. And if I'm going to stand out, well, I'll wear a nice hijab then. I'll make sure I look good while I'm doing it. I mean, people like boxes, people like categories, that's how we make sense of the world. But it's not about being limited by that. It's actually about, well, if the only thing they see here is that I'm a woman or that I'm Muslim, then, you know, I've got a responsibility to do my best for that.
How have you found like you mentioned a few minutes ago, or that one of the TV channels had said that, you know, it was refreshing that there was seeing a young female face for one. How have you found generally the non-Muslim response to your leadership journey?
Yeah, I think it's been really nice, really positive. Obviously, it's worrying that it is really nice and positive in the sense that there's been such a lack of, and we're 2020 guys, what's going on? I mean, for them, obviously, it's great, and I think refreshing in the sense that there's a lot of stereotypes. I mean, unfortunately, a lot of what people digest about Muslims is not true. For those who you met Muslims, you know, it's a very small minority. So seeing a woman not all dressed in black, not looking like she's, you know what I mean, the caricature hijabi oppressed is really important, and for them sometimes it can actually be a penny drop moment that we don't all go around oppressed by our husbands. We might laugh and we might think it's funny, but unfortunately for people it can be quite shocking to see. So I mean, and also having the Scottish accent, I think, really is, for some people,
they don't expect it.
They really don't expect it. I don't know what they think is going to come out, but they don't expect a Scottish accent. Even some of our English Muslim counterparts, though, don't expect a Scottish accent. So I'm always very proud of it. Although every conversation I have with someone from down south, I have to say, it's a Scottish accent. Now that we've got that out of the way, can we start our conversation?
Although all of ours is not that strong.
Okay, yeah, we say that, but
I don't know
when you
if
go down south, right, to go to like a national conference or whatever,
they
make
struggle.
it out like we're talking a different language, honestly.
So, ladies, I was going to ask you, what do you think is really important from your leadership journeys for women out there? What is your message, guys?
Oh, I was not prepared for this.
See that? They think they control the podcast.
What's important? I think you've kind of touched upon them all. Having a good support network is key. I think for me, I was quite affected by what other people thought of me in these kind of positions, and it would kind of boost my confidence up or down depending on the feedback that I got. So having a good support network, having people who can be quite critical of you, because the worst thing you can do being in a leadership position is not improving, or just going about thinking you're doing the best when in fact there's so much you can do to change. And having that time off for yourself to know who you are. So as cliche as that is, you can almost lose yourself when you're in these positions. Is that a plane?
I don't know, but I was really...
We've had an ambulance. We've had a plane.
Sorry, it's the crime capital of Europe.
Excuse me.
It's not
in cultural capital is what we're framing this as.
People make Glasgow.
Yeah, I mean,
nothing else does.
We could be the crime capital, and we can also be like one of the most beautiful countries.
And we have the smiliest thing. We're really happy as well.
They say that Glasgow is the most friendly city in the world. Like, yes, people will stab you, but then they'll take you to the hospital. So
buy you a cup of tea.
Yeah.
So no, as you think, I think that's really important.
Yeah. So having a good support network, understanding who you are and developing in the process, because you can lose yourself into it. Because it can be quite a lot and you put unrealistic expectations upon yourself. So regularly checking in, regularly reflecting as well is quite important. What about you, Yasmin?
I think know what you want out of it, and always make sure that this whole renewing of intentions, I think, we always have nice intentions at the start, but I think sometimes we get lost or caught up in whatever it is that comes with being a female leader, and we forget ourselves, and I think that whole important, the whole self-care, and I know it's become like such a buzzword now, but it is like, our religion's built in self-care for us, and so making sure that you don't lose yourself, because I think we've seen it too often where we're all excited there's another female leader out there, and we set high expectations for ourselves and by others as well, and we just lose ourselves that we don't, so just making sure that we know what we want, we have a clear path, and having a support network.
I think it's quite important to gain this idea of mentorship. I remember when I started you know, the leaders, the guys around me were all talking about their mentor said this, or their sheikh said this, or so-and-so said this, and they had so many people around them teaching them things that I did not have. So I kind of looked around. I used to go to my dad for things, you know. My dad's not in the active sphere or anything like that. So it was quite difficult, but then that's when I kind of started to, like, your peers can be your mentors as well, someone who's been through that. I mean,
but I think having someone outside that atmosphere also helps.
Yeah, it definitely does. I think you need a balance, but you can't have it all within yourself because your experience is limited and your knowledge is very, very limited. So you kind of need that. That's the whole idea of shura as well. In Islam, we've got this idea of shura because of that. Your decisions as a leader can't be your own. Yeah. They have to be, you know, from a collective, and that's something, you know, we have to learn and we have to seek.
Yeah, absolutely. Completely agree with that. And I think it's that mentorship, you're right, that often you're not sure, you don't know what to do, and you just need a second opinion. And it's okay to take that and not feel like, oh my god, I need to have all the answers. So I think it's having the humility in leadership as well, to ask for help if you need it.
I think towards the end I kind of realised that, you know, my leadership is just directing this amazing team that you've got and the skills, because they have the skills, it's not necessarily yourself, and then doing something great together. It's all about that teamwork, and you're simply directing them. Because I think initially I used to think that I had to show a strong face all the time. Okay, I had to be kind of this bold person, nothing can affect me, my emotions didn't matter, and then that, you know, that's a recipe for burnout. So slowly you realise, you know, leadership, that's not what leadership is. And I think it's just that cultural change that we need with people doing this stuff or putting themselves forward for things, that they have this idea of what it should be, and then they don't necessarily think that they can fit.
But how do we have those difficult conversations? I think just to be a bit practical, you know, how do we not shy away from having those conversations?
I think for those listening, it's almost like if you're thinking about something but feel like you're not quite there, do it anyway. I don't think I've ever done something where I felt I was capable of doing it, if that makes sense. I'm always like, okay, I'm not very good at this, let me do it so I can improve. And that's the only way you do develop. Obviously, there's kind of limits. You have to know that you're not doing something that you're definitely not a fit in. Because we've seen it in organisations where people who you know, have no qualifications to be in that position are very dangerous for that position, and how it all crumbles apart. You have to have some degree of experience, but going out with your comfort zone is really, really important. But how we start those conversations, it's a good question.
So I guess we've got to talk to people. No, I mean, I think difficult conversations are part and parcel of anything in life, whether it's in leadership, talking to your team, talking to your mum, talking to your spouse. Difficult conversations are part of it. But I think, first of all, it's about being objective and thinking about what is in the best interests of whether the organisation, the people I'm representing, faith, your own well-being, the people around you. So I think, like Yasmin said, it's first setting that intention and objective right, and then the path onwards. I mean, being president and being in charge of teams, often you find that there's a lot of different people on the team, they have a lot of different skills, and fundamentally they have a different way of learning and communicating. And you can't have the same approach with every person. You've got to think about, and as you were saying, leadership is about directing people, but also about helping people develop and achieve their fullest potential. And in some ways you're also a coach, you're also a mentor, you're also agony aunt. You have all these different hats on you, and really what you're trying to do is nurture the people around you, but you do need someone to nurture you too. So I think that difficult conversations first start with relationships and building good relationships of trust, so people want your feedback and also want to give you feedback. I was speaking to someone, I did one of these upskilling workshops. She had a very negative perception of what people thought of her. And I said, have you ever asked anyone what they think? No. I was like, well then, how are you assuming people think so negatively of you if you've never asked? Oh, well, I never thought. And I was like, you need to go ask for feedback. And I said, then the optimum position is not just when you ask for feedback, when people ask you to give them feedback. And I think that's when you've really hit a much higher point of growth.
Do you think we're honest with each other, though, with this?
When you have the right people around. And the thing is, I think it's good to get feedback from people who are honest. We all hope everybody's honest. Who are super critical, and maybe who are super supportive. Like, there's no one good type of feedback. And then you just got to kind of take a balance. You'll know intuitively, like, oh, that's a bit extreme there. I wasn't that bad, but or I wasn't that amazing, with a pinch of salt. So I think it's about having a really holistic approach. But as you say, you've got to be willing to learn.
Do we take feedback well, though? Because you've been in a position before where you've given feedback, and sometimes it's taken really well, and I
still give feedback, Rafa.
Even though when they take it really badly.
Whether it's continue. The person in the sandwich shop that didn't warm up my panini.
You're a difficult person, Zara.
You know what I mean? Oh, my little sister hates going out with me because I'm like, oh my God, I need to give feedback.
Yeah, whenever Zara can whip out a feedback form, she'll do it. No worries.
Oh my God. Look, not everybody takes feedback well, and that's okay. I'm still going to give you the feedback. I mean, ultimately, the way I see it is you have a duty to tell someone. If it is one of those situations, not necessarily, not talking about funny things here, but if genuinely you feel like someone could benefit from that feedback, or by withholding that information it's not going to be good, then you should definitely say something, but with wisdom and tact. You do not need to say something with blunt force trauma. That isn't going to help anybody. But sometimes they say you need to rip the plaster off. So I don't know, guys. Just make the best decision. Try not to make anybody cry.
Just to take a step back, not everyone's going to be in a leadership position. Not everyone's going to be in a notable position. But a lot of what we're saying can be applied in our everyday lives. So what advice would you give to people in just going about their daily lives that will face these problems, but not necessarily in a community leadership environment?
Yeah, no, definitely. I think I'll make maybe 3 points then to address all the different themes of today's conversation. So firstly, if you are a woman in leadership or a woman considering leadership, and by leadership we're going to make that broad in terms of a new role, challenging your environment. You're thinking to do something in which you're going to influence and work with people. I think the first thing is not to be overly conscious of your gender. But if maybe you're going into an environment where there are a predominantly male kind of demographic, I think the first thing to do is believe in yourself and have confidence that Allah has confidence in you. Okay? So first is that internal spiritual base. Secondly, seek advice and have that good supportive network. And if you don't, build it and give yourself that exposure. So I think challenging your own perceptions of yourself and keeping that spirituality is really key. Secondly, in terms of those who are facing some bumps in the road, who may be unsure about how to grow and how to continue their leadership or just their journey in life, I think it's really important for upskilling. This is the new buzzword now. Upskilling. I think it's about growth. As a Muslim, as a believer, and as a human being, I think growth is really important. That doesn't equate to burnout and doing lots of things so you look really busy and it's not effective, but real growth. Think about how you can be a better human being, a better Muslim, and also thinking about your skills, where you can contribute the most. And thirdly, in terms of, I guess, if you're not in any of these leadership spaces, but just a normal person, we all hope to be normal people. I think that the great thing about this podcast is about critical conversations and engaging dialogue. And I find that often when I'm travelling, I speak to lots of strangers, but I learn so much. Mm-hmm. And I find that you really need to increase your network and really learn from people around you, whether it's for inspiration or just whether it's to broaden your mind. I think this podcast is a really important platform for broadening your thinking and to think about things differently. Everybody has a different perspective, and I think that's how we grow and learn, is by sharing that. And there's a diversity of views even within the Ummah, and even just within this little podcast that we have here. So I think it's about challenging your environment, your comfort zones, building that spiritual base, learning and growing, and being also prepared to challenge your perceptions and assumptions. So those are just some of my kind of take-home advice.
Nice.
Thank you. I think just before we wrap up, we had one final question. So we've, just the rumour that's going about, but we've heard that you really like desserts. Is this the true key to your success?
There was quite a strong rumour about my milkshake intake during the term 2016-17 of my presidency. I'm not going to lie here on this podcast, but unfortunately I have a very significant sugar habit, which evolved from milkshakes to waffles. Now we're just on it's an open season right now. I've just had my, we can't plug Tim Hortons French vanilla. No, I think sugar plays a really important role, but I am trying to cut it back. I think with all things, you got to have a little bit of happiness, guys. Have a little bit of happiness. If it's a bit of chocolate or a cup of tea, go for it. I'm not going to say no. And if you've got a cup of tea for me, then I'll come on over. So I think dessert is a really important fuel for the soul.
Come to Glasgow. Zara will take you for dessert. We've got good ones here. Sauchiehall Street's great.
Yeah, we'll walk up and down. It's Sammy's treat though, guys.
So Jazakallah khair, Zara, for joining us. And I guess Jazakallah khair to us, because it's a one-off thing.
But no. Comment if you would like us to take over this podcast.
It's pretty male heavy,
just
guys.
Patch Thaqib and Sammy.
Yeah, but follow us for more, and like Yasmin said, request us back. We're available on iTunes, Spotify, YouTube. Follow us on Twitter and Facebook on Middle West Podcast, and the Middle West Podcast on Instagram as well.
And feel free to email us as well, middlewestpc@gmail.com.
Yep. سبحان وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله.
وعليكم السلام.